Okay, good morning. I'm Esther Manheimer, Mayor of the City of Asheville, and I'd like to welcome you to the May 4th Agenda Briefing Work Session. All council members and staff are participating virtually. The live meeting will be streamed on the city's YouTube channel, accessed through the YouTube icon on the front page of the city's website, or via the live stream. The live meeting will be available on Charter Spectrum Channel 193. You may also listen to the meeting via telephone at 855-925-2801, meeting code 6407. We do not take public comments during this meeting, and I'll now turn it over to the City Manager, Deborah Campbell.
Thank you, Mayor, and good morning, everyone. We're going to have both our Assistant City Managers, Ben Woody and Rachel Wood. I believe they're going to tag team to first address the first agenda item, which is the review of our upcoming council meeting on May 9th. I believe Ben is going to take the lead and review most of the agenda. And also, Ben's not feeling well, so please take it easy on him this morning. So, Ben, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Deborah. Appreciate that. And good morning, Mayor, members of council. I'm going to move through most of the agenda. I'm going to pass it over to staff a couple of instances, but as I do, please stop me if you have any questions or want to have any additional discussion. So we don't have any work sessions on our meeting on Tuesday. And so with that, I'll jump right into the consent agenda. Item B is a contract totaling $1.5 million and is for engineering services. And this project is identified as a needed improvement in the 2019 Water System Master Plan, is included in the Water Department's CIP. What the project is specifically is the construction of a new pump station, piping changes, the addition of a control valve, and the potential replacement of a 12-inch water main on Sweeten Creek Road. All these improvements to our water system will occur in the South Buncombe area of the system. And the net result of this is it will improve pumping capacities, better regulate pressures, and provide better control of inflows and outflows. Item C is an interlocal agreement that continues the food scrap strap-off program, which has been a very successful collaboration between the city and the county. The Environment and Safety Council Committee voted 3-0 to recommend approval of this interlocal, or of this resolution authorizing the interlocal agreement. Consent item D is the acceptance of grant funds to replace an antenna on a fire department communications vehicle. Item E is renews an existing contract for our RecTrack software system. This is the software that Parks and Recreation uses to manage their daily operations. So that's when you go online and you register, you make rentals, memberships, all those types of services are managed. The workflow is managed through RecTrack. What this contract also does is it moves the service from an on-premise service to a fully hosted cloud-based software as a service product, which is the better direction to go in terms of managing our technology. So this is a good project for the Parks and Recreation Department, for the community as well. Item F is a construction contract totaling over $4 million to move forward with the Memorial Stadium Mountainside Park Phase 2 improvements. Those planned improvements include a new track, new restroom and concession buildings, playground improvements, a walking trail, and the removal of the western metal bleachers. 3.5% of the total work will be performed by woman-owned subcontractors. And finally, City Council did vote on this March 22nd, 2022 to move forward with these improvements. So this is just a culmination of that into a construction contract. Item G is a design contract for just over $127,000 for Nature Center, for the Nature Center Gateway project. So that's just the design of features associated with the entrance into the Nature Center. Item H is a professional services contract, not to exceed $150,000. What this does, it conducts a flood mitigation and damage reduction feasibility study for the Swananoa River Road corridor. Again, that's an important east-west connection in the city that is prone to flooding from the Swananoa River. The funds for this study came from a Golden Leaf Foundation grant that was approved by council on December 13th, 2022. Item I is a professional services contract for $50,000 to prepare the Reed Creek Greenway Extension feasibility study. The funds for this study came from the French Broad River MPO grant that was approved by council on June 10th of 2022. Item J is an agreement in the amount of $5,000 for improvements to an existing traffic signal at the intersection of Swannanoa River Road and Bleachery Boulevard. And these improvements are associated with the Swannanoa River Greenway project that's moving into construction. And finally, item K is a confirmation of a settlement agreement. And that concludes my review of the consent agenda. Any questions on that? Great. I'm going to keep moving then. Under presentations and reports, we're going to have at the council meeting a presentation on the FY 2024 operating budget. I'm not going to spend time on that. Later under our other issues and updates portion of the agenda today, our city manager, Deborah Campbell, and interim finance director, Taylor Floyd, are going to speak in more detail about that item. And item B under presentations and reports is our sports commission consultant recommendation. And I believe that Chris Corll is here today, and I'm going to hand off to him or Deborah to talk about that item in a little more detail.
Yeah, I'm going to ask Chris to speak to that particular agenda item. What I hope council will receive this information in terms of just the study recommendations. Staff will not be making any type of recommendation about next steps other than to further discuss before we ask for any type of action for council. It may even be a consideration of refer this study to a committee for further discussion. So Chris, I'll turn it over to you to just give the highlights of the recommendations. And I believe Sage has raised her hand as well.
Sure. Just real quickly, I'll say that continuing to a committee, while it sounds great, there probably won't be time. I understand this item will go to a vote of those founding members by the end of the month.
Okay.
Well, we could request from them more time if that's what the council decides they want to do in terms of the process.
Absolutely, and I would support such.
Thank you, Mayor.
Good morning. Councilmember Turner's right. It's definitely going to go to a vote sooner than later, and we could certainly ask. And we already did once to delay the votes, and I don't know if we'd be able to delay it or not, as we're 25% of the total votes in the founding member. But yeah, the Sports Commission update is simply that, just an update of the findings of the consultant report that was initiated by the founding members last summer, which the founding members are UNC Asheville, Buncombe County, City of Asheville, and the Tourism Development Authority. And so we'll just overview the recommendations from the consultant and what next steps moving forward would be, presuming that we follow those recommendations. I can go more in depth now. I don't know how in depth y'all want to get right now. All right. Well, thank you, and I'll see you on Tuesday.
Thanks, Chris.
Thank you, Chris.
Okay, so this is Kim. I guess I do have a couple questions. When I went to the Sports Commission meeting last at the Civic Center where the presentation was made, which I'd hope we might have some more information today. One of the things that I took away from that is we could phase the recommendations. I realize that would require input from us and also hopefully other founding members. But one of the recommendations would be to add more members, which I feel like could build trust with the community on this important decision. There were some concerns from the rather large group in attendance that could be a positive step. Are we approaching that? I feel like asking for more time and sending it to a committee could be part of what that could look like. But we could have a conversation with the county and the other members.
Yeah, I would say a fair thing is that everything is on the table right now. These are only recommendations. It's nothing that we're 100% moving forward with. Although, like Councilmember Turner mentioned, it's a a vote is theoretically imminent on accepting these recommendations, but one of them was to expand the founding member board from 4 to 7 members. So I would say key talking points or discussion points are, what do those extra member seats look like and what type of member of the community are they? Some of the recommendations were like an economic development leader in the community or the leader of the advisory board. I would suggest personally, like there should be somebody from the healthcare industry in there because we're talking about sports and youth sports, so it has health ties. But anything's on the table and any ideas I think are on the table. And there are some listening sessions that the county is running point on that are scheduled on May 18th in the morning. So there's opportunity for more input to come in there. And I've been speaking with the TDA almost daily and the Sports Commission and the county as far as trying to figure out a good middle ground solution that feels really good for all parties involved.
So hearing that we could ask for more time and that we could send it to advisory, we also could align that with wanting to participate in the listening sessions and to be able to respond. This is potentially a really big decision for the future of sports in our community, which we know is an economic development concern, but also programming for our youth. If we move away from some of the smaller grassroots events that have directly included our youth, that would be unfortunate. And I don't know if that's the goal, but I do think a goal that's also a recommendation is updating the bylaws. Mm-hmm. So of course, no one's going to be super excited about like, yay, let's update bylaws. But we have a history of, making these decisions really quickly instead of really getting buy-in. If the county is doing listening, which advisory group would we send this to in the city to participate in the listening sessions or at least run parallel?
I don't know which advisory group we would send this to other than maybe the Civic Center Commission, just because our group works directly with the Sports Commission and Sports Commission events often, but I'm not sure as far as a council committee, which one would make sense.
Seems like maybe economic development, planning economic development. And also if we had active, like robust Parks and Rec advisory board, I would suggest that they would be involved too. I know Sage, you have your hand up.
Just real quick, sorry I can't be on camera. I'm in the middle of a work site, but first of all, Kim, thank you for leaning in on this issue, and Chris for all you've been doing. I think you're right that PED is probably the most logical related committee. I would love to think that we could get some more time. However, I do, like Chris said, we're just 25%. I represent one of the votes, so then we may not get it, but I certainly welcome having a broader discussion. Kim is right. This has a large impact in the community. And for those listening that may not be sure what we're talking about, this organization, this nonprofit is 12 years old. And it was founded by a county commissioner and a city council person at the time and took on these other partnerships of the TDA and the UNCA. So it is something that came from our own doing. And that's why I've been so concerned in wanting to bring it back to us. If it were to cease to exist, we need to be involved in that decision. The community needs to know more about it. So I'm all in favor of slowing things down and trying to get more input on the table and more feedback, more ideas. Sorry about the noise. And I'll do my best to support that without any members.
Yeah, I'm especially thinking about just because of the investment and the agreements that we just made around McCormick Field and the use of our public facility, as we're having conversations about the future of Thomas Wolfe, for example, doing some of that resource mapping is important, and throwing our sports commission in the recycle bin seems like maybe odd timing. So I would love to hear a future conversation at the next PED meeting.
So can I just ask a logistics question here? I mean, so the people that get to vote on this are a representative from UNC Asheville, a representative from the TDA, and one county commissioner, and Sage is our representative. So there's 4 votes and they've got this timeline. So we're apparently at the mercy of their timeline. So we can request more time. And I've actually talked to Amanda Edwards about needing more time, and just so that we could hear from Chris at the upcoming council meeting. And they agreed to that. But I don't know how much more they will agree to. But somebody said something about the county commission is holding listening sessions about this proposal. Chris, can you tell me more about that?
It's one listening session. It's being hosted by the founding members, but the county is running point on that. So it's at the county's building, and Amanda Edwards is the one that organized and sent out the invite.
So could we work together with them on that and just send out, communications on our side if council's in agreement with that, so that folks on our list know that that's happening and they can go to that event and speak about it? Would that be appropriate?
I might lean on Councilmember Turner, but I actually don't know if they're like fully open to the public listening sessions. I believe it's just for the Sports Commission board and the TDA board.
Yeah, that's my understanding. This came from my request for both of the boards of the TDA and the Sports Commission to sit in a room together, which they have yet to do. And it's an interesting situation because I'm just one of the votes, and the answer on the request for both boards to sit together was a no from the TDA board. So now I think some executive committee members have been invited to the listening session, but Chris is correct. It is the Sports Commission board and the founding members and the TDA executive board, should they desire to come.
So it's not an open to the public.
Well,
there's not one of those scheduled.
It's not very clear. It's not clearly said either way. I did see that ABL Watchdog posted the listening session date and time, so maybe people will show up. And I could inquire and see if they're, interested in being open to the public. I was just 1/4 of the votes. I don't know what that response is, but I could follow up with everyone.
But Sage, there may not be opportunity for like public comment or anything like that. It would truly be an opportunity to hear the discussion, right?
Right, and I think
my understanding.
Yeah, the Sports Commission board found out about this study and this potential just, a week ago. So this would be their first time to really give us some feedback.
And I'm hoping that we can get the partners to agree to just give us a little bit more time, the city, and particularly mayor and council, an opportunity to digest the recommendations and hopefully move forward with those that we feel, you all feel, from an actionable perspective are most appropriate and has the most positive community benefit for us.
I will contact the founding members just as a general request, both about whether or not it is public, if the public can attend and at least observe, and how they're feeling about a request for more time.
Thank you, Maggie and Kim.
Just in the process of things, I know that we had a PED scheduled meeting on Monday, but that's been canceled, and I don't know if that's just availability, but if we're trying to have as much conversation as possible and we're concerned about extending the timeline, would putting that back on the calendar be possible and having a PED conversation Monday before we have a conversation that includes public comment on Tuesday?
I think I'm a little bit worried that we could be having all the conversation we want on our side and we can process it through all the committees we want, but that may not be the process that will fit in with the founding member vote, apparently, that gets to make this decision. Do you see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
I mean, so I guess I would want to understand what process on the city side would be able to be productive when it comes to the founding member votes decision. And again, there's apparently these 4 votes. They get to make the decision. Only one of them is the city council representative. So I don't have any opposition to discussing it ad nauseum in committees. I'm just wondering to what end if we're kind of just operating outside of the process that's going to make this decision.
Well, and part of me wonders, like, we're almost all here right now. Like, so far the conversation right now has been about process and getting more time, but I'm still kind of like, what's the what here? Like, I'm guessing because folks are asking for more time, it's because they don't fully love the recommendation at hand. And so, like, we're all on a call right now, we could just start talking about it.
Love it or understand it. And so in terms of just the extent of the document or the recommendations, and maybe there's enough information that's been out there that you all know what the recommendations are. I think the benefit may be, again, for you all to have an opportunity to understand what the recommendations are so that SAGE has and SAGE, I don't mean to talk for you or on your behalf, but you have a comfort level that you are representing, truly representing the desires and wishes of the council.
Right. And
That was my only concern in terms of having a little bit more thorough discussion of the matter.
yeah, exactly. I mean, you know, any one of us could be in this seat and making this decision for the community. And I would like to hear from you all to make sure I'm representing our best interests as a council and community. I'm also emailing the founding members right now, so perhaps I'll hear back by the time this agenda briefing is complete.
I would note that there are, with the recommendation that the Sports Commission go under the auspice of the TDA, I think that was shocking here in Asheville. One, because it has been independent for 12-ish years, and throughout the process of this consultant report, and the consultant was in the community and did public outreach, he consistently stated that he was like an independent sports commission guy, and he felt like that was the best thing for sports commissions, and that was where he thought it was going. And then the recommendation did not suggest that. So there was a lot of shock and awe when that happened. And you know, there's a lot of pros and cons to moving the sports commission underneath the CVB. There's also a lot of pros and cons of keeping it out of the CVB. But I think it's something like 70% of CVBs or 70% of sports commissions throughout the country are inside CVBs. So it is not incredibly abnormal. It's just different for us, and trying to completely understand like what that structure is and why is key. And there's a lot of key questions as far as like, what's the CVB's vision for the budget for the sports commission? Who's going to take risk on what the events are that the sports commission produces, which are like predominantly in our facilities. So if they're not taking risk, someone has to. And it's not like that's a weird thing for us at Harris. Like, we take risk occasionally on events, but we just historically haven't had to on the sporting events. And so these are just things that should be considered and should be talked about. Sorry, Councilmember Rooney, you've had your hand up for a while.
Yeah, I'm glad that you jumped in, because those were some of the questions. And I was just imagining that if someone was tuning in right now, they might be really confused as what in the world we're talking about. And so for one of the things that has come to my attention is not only that this decision was made to start the Sports Commission 12 years ago, but some of the things that I've learned through paying attention to this process, thanks to Councilmember Turner in the past couple months, is that we're talking about literally folding our Sports Commission and embedding it underneath our CVB or TDA. And so it means essentially growing that TDA's role in our community. And I think because of the conversation that we're having today and the questions that I have now that Chris is, talking about, it's not uncommon, but it is a decision we need to make as a community. We just literally haven't had enough time to have that big of a discussion. And it feels a little opaque to me. And I'm not even sure if I fully understand it. So that's why I'm asking, and hopefully others will ask, for us to take this to PED.
Well, we're gonna get a full council presentation on it. If that PED wants to hear it in addition to the full, but whatever you guys decide. But we are going to hear a full presentation on this Tuesday from Chris. And Chris, I think it would be, I'm sure your presentation is going to be really, really thorough, but it would be very helpful for us to understand the scope of what the Sports Commission does. There's been a lot of the language around this, and the description is a little bit confusing to me, because the TDA will say things like, sports and leisure, sports travel is a third of all travelers, and that may be, but that's not Sports Commission events. Sports Commission events are SoCon and gymnastics and cheer, right? And wrestling, all at the Civic Center. It is not, baseball. It is not pro soccer. It's not a bunch of, so it's not every sporting event that happens in Asheville and Buncombe County, not even close. The majority of which, though, do happen in the Civic Center. So, we're obviously pretty intertwined in this commission. I will just say, when the Sports Commission was started in 2010, there was a lot of tension around the funding part of it. And it was a little bit of a like, why should the city and county have to put up funding for the Sports Commission? We have this room tax, which is now, of course, in excess of $40 million a year. Why isn't it fully funding something like the Sports Commission? And so right now, annually, the city provides $40,000 a year, I think is the number, for the Sports Commission, but of course hosts the bulk of the events at Harris. So I'm glad. I'm looking forward to the presentation. If PED wants to take this on too, I don't know what Chris's schedule is like, but
and again, I think we have to maybe wait until we hear from those other founding members, Mayor, if we're going to get additional time. Otherwise, I think Sage's going to have to vote.
okay, so maybe we'll circle back. Maybe during the course of this meeting, Sage will hear, and we'll circle back.
That'd be great. And if we don't hear back today, we'll try to communicate with you all before the end of the week, for sure.
And I can maybe adjust my presentation. I guess I would ask Councilmember Ullman, I was really high level and she got to see a preview at the Civic Center Commission because I was truly just, this is the recommendation, this is what they said, and next steps. I wasn't intending to get deep into what the Sports Commission is and does, but I can.
That's what I was gonna chime in. Yeah, as Chris is saying, at the Civic Center Commission on Tuesday, we heard a presentation, and that commission includes folks from the TDA and from the Sports Commission. So we had a really nice conversation. And the biggest thing from your presentation that wasn't there, that I've had to go into the huddle up reports, is the why behind the strategy, because the high level conversation out that I've just been hearing out in the community and in the press is that the recommendation is about financial sustainability. And I've had to do a lot more work on that to look into it. And that's fine. We all do our homework. We all read up on this stuff. But I think getting into some of that would be helpful if possible. I know that might also have some subjectiveness to it. But I think the why behind the strategy, and a big question I had asked at the Civic Center Commission, because I was similar to you were saying, Councilman Roney, it's kind of the process, what is this about? And I was well, what's the problem we're trying to fix? And both folks who were there from the TDA and from the Sports Commission were both really clear, it's not that there's a problem that's trying to be fixed. It's kind of this idea of the potential to scale up the impact of the Sports Commission by leveraging, not having to fundraise for their own payroll administrator, just having back of the house support and connection to bigger strategy. And so that was the first scratch towards okay, I understand a little bit of the why, but I've been hearing more about the concern than the purpose behind why this expert consultant said that. So I think that is really helpful for us, because I don't think it's really a clear-cut choice in my mind yet, and I'm still doing listening and reading. But I think if you could provide some of here's the actual recommendation, here's the rationale, this expertise said this, here's some of that backstory, that's context that'll help us kind of dig into it. And I'm committed to continuing my work to prepare for Tuesday, and hope that we can all just dig in on Tuesday. And given the timeline, who knows, maybe the other 4 founding members will be yeah, sure, we can move this. But if not, it sounds let's prepare for Tuesday to be our big conversation about it. And if we need more time, we can, or we could consider it at that time.
Yep.
Here, I have a quick question for you. I've gotten one response. The room that is reserved at the county building is small and not meant for a larger group. So the first question will be, could we move the meeting to somewhere larger? If so, maybe we have a space, but I'll I'll chat with staff over that during the meeting and hopefully have more information by the end.
Okay.
Thank you, Chris.
Thank you.
Okay. I'm going to keep moving through the agenda. Next, under presentations and reports, we have the city manager's report, and we have 2 items under that for this meeting. The first is an update on the point in time count, and we'll have Emily Ball there to present, and she's going to review results from the January 2023 point in time count, and she'll also provide a status update on the work of HIAC to implement the recommendations from the National Alliance to End Homelessness. The other item on the manager's report will be an update on the Tourism Development Authority grant process, and we're going to have Jamie Matthews today briefly discuss that item.
Thank you, Ben. Good morning, everyone. So on Tuesday, Chris and I will give an update on the tourism development grant process. The update's going to include several things. First, an update on the legislative changes that were made last year. Second, the upcoming grant timelines. And third, the projects the city will be focusing on this year and upcoming years. So just a brief preview for you all. This year's TPDF cycle, which opened on April 12th, the city is going to focus on maintenance needs at Harrah's and the second phase of the municipal golf course project. Chris is going to give more details on those projects on Tuesday, on what those will entail. The Cox Avenue project that was reallocated to McCormick will be part of the LIFT process that will start in October. For upcoming years, the city and possible projects will include I-26, affordable housing, Pack Square, infrastructure improvements downtown, including some ADA improvements to sidewalks that were prioritized and looked at in the GAP plan that you all approved, and Thomas Wolfe. So we will give more details on the process and the projects on Tuesday. If you have any questions now, we'll be happy to answer them. And Chris, if you have anything to add, please go for it.
I would just add that both of those projects are currently funded and not a request for new money. Harrah's is through the Harrah's naming rights funds and our annual capital maintenance allocation that we've built up over a couple of years. And the golf course city side match would be through some potential funding that we have possibly coming through a nonprofit. And if that comes to fruition, we would move forward. But if it does not come together through the summer, we'd pull our application for the second phase golf request.
Okay, if there's no questions on those items, I'll move to the public hearings portion of our agenda for Tuesday. We have 2 public hearings, and the first item A is the adoption of a resolution authorizing the submittal of the 2023-24 annual action plan for CDBG and home funding. The city receives these HUD funding allocations annually through a federal formula allocation process. As council is aware, the CDBG funds support housing and community development activities in Asheville and the city limits, and the home funds support affordable housing activities within a 4-county consortium area. Approval of this annual action plan allows the HUD funding to then be utilized by our community partners for those purposes around affordable housing and community development. The recommended use of the funds, so you can see more details specifically about the funding recommendations in the agenda request form that's linked to your agenda today. This item has been considered and voted on by the Housing and Community Development Council Committee, as well as the Asheville Regional Housing Consortium Board, and both those bodies voted in favor of the funding recommendations. Any questions on that public hearing item? Okay, moving to item B, this is a text amendment, kind of a cleanup item, I would characterize it, to our UDO, and it relates to the open space amendment that council adopted on July 26th of 2022. The current code, the code that's in place, incentivizes development projects to either provide affordable housing or to upgrade their stormwater management infrastructure. And in doing that, they're able to reduce their open space set-asides. What the staff has found is that there's an exemption where you can do, you can provide new expansions or additions to an existing property, and you can do that and not have to meet these requirements for the increased open space or the enhanced stormwater or affordable housing requirements. That exemption right now is set at 1,500 square feet. We found through application that that is not practical for large existing sites. And so staff is recommending to change the exemption for new expansions or additions to less than 50% of the existing building square footage. And the 50% aligns with our ordinance as it already relates to when redevelopment of sites have to meet full site compliance. So again, that 50% number is the threshold we already use for redevelopment. So what this really does is just aligns the open space requirements with that existing threshold. Couple other minor things, it cleans up some language around how we name or identify historic landmark properties. Typically, we're not making historic landmark properties do these types of upgrades. The Planning and Zoning Commission heard this item at their April 5th meeting, and they did recommend unanimous approval. The staff is also recommending approval. Any questions on that? It's a very technical amendment. And of course, at the public hearing, the planning staff will provide a pretty detailed presentation. Okay, I'm gonna keep moving. Actually, that concludes our review of the council agenda for next week. Councilwoman Roney.
Trying to figure out where this thread fits. I know that the Urban Forestry Commission has made recommendations in the past around 7-Eleven and specifically around open space, but can you help me understand the balance of, is this the part of 7-Eleven that would include recommendations for our advisory boards, or is this a different arm of the 7-Eleven review?
It's a very good question, and this is that same section that we've done a lot of work in, and I hope I'm going to hopefully be accurate in this. This particular change is really focused in on the original work that the Urban Forestry Commission as well as the community members worked on, and it's just really, again, related to just kind of how we trigger stormwater management controls and open space and things like that. I think the forthcoming revisions, the next set, I believe are more related to tree preservation specifically. So not so broad in scope about just open space, but more about like, what are we doing with trees and open space, and when are we requiring them, and what are our planting standards? So that future item will connect to this section, but in a different way, if that makes sense.
It does. And so I know at our Urban Forestry Commission meeting earlier this week, our new urban forester, Keith, did mention that there were some changes happening. I think that was a little bit of a surprise to members who were like, wait, is it going to match or not? And so what I'm hearing is that there's 2 parts.
Yes.
So this is part 1.
Correct. And those future changes, I've asked the DSD staff and the planning staff to make sure they're coordinating on that. So when we do bring back a set of revisions, they encompass tree preservation, open space, all that comes together as a package. So
thank you so much.
Yep. Okay, then if that, no more questions on that, I'm going to move to the council committees section. My 2 committees are actually canceled for this month, so my update's very easy. So PED and boards and commissions do not have meetings scheduled in May. However, we do have meetings scheduled for policy, finance, human resources, HCD, and equity engagement. So I'm going to turn it over to Deborah to cover policy and finance, and then I think Rachel will cover HCD and equity and engagement.
All righty, thank you, Dan. And for Finance and HR Committee, we only have 1 item. It is a lead request at Fairhaven, Summit Apartments. It is actually a development proposal that you all, on April the 25th, approved Housing Trust Fund dollars to support this development. And this is a further request of support. And it's 77 units, I believe, the majority being affordable. And it is a proposal that is 100% affordable units. And that is the only thing that we have on the agenda, and we will need action. We apologize. We normally like to have more of a substantive agenda, but this is kind of time sensitive, and you will see it on your 8-week calendar that we're asking for action later on at our May meeting. So that is the only item on the agenda.
Thank you, Deborah. I can now cover the May 16th Housing and Community Development Committee meeting. So this agenda currently has 2 items slated for discussion. The first is going to be an update on the affordable housing plan. Later this month, the affordable housing team is going to advertise a solicitation to select a firm to update that 2008 plan. And the scope is going to include an assessment of the existing housing trust fund tools that we have, including the existing affordable housing tools that we have, including the Housing Trust Fund, as well as the Land Use Incentive Grant Program. So Sasha's just going to give an update on that process, give you an overview of the schedule, and then talk through how that firm is going to help us coordinate the review of several policies and considering any other available tools to incentivize affordable housing. The second item on the agenda is a review of a land use incentive grant request for 46 Aston, which is the Aston Flats micro units project. There was a very detailed review by the Affordable Housing Advisory Committee, and they actually took a motion on this project earlier today. The Housing and Community Development Committee referred this to the Affordable Housing Advisory Committee for review, primarily to look at micro housing and their compliance with the land use incentive grant policy, and really want to thank AHAC for the thorough review that they conducted. It's been a bit of a difficult conversation for AHAC to have because they have broader land use incentive grant policy concerns. So it's been challenging for them to focus in on compliance of micro units whenever they have those broader questions around the land use incentive grant policy, which of course will be considered as a part of that broader work with the affordable housing plan. So today a motion was taken by the Affordable Housing Advisory Committee, and it's kind of a 2-part motion. So they, of course, want to recommend the review of the land use incentive grant policy in a broader context, and in the meantime suggest that the city consider either deferring land use incentive grant decisions for micro housing, or alternatively confirming that the developers fully address all of the committee's concerns and commit to setting aside 50% of the affordable units for voucher holders. So the developer did request to have HCD consider this land use incentive grant application at the May 16th meeting. And so there will be likely a pretty robust conversation during that meeting regarding the concerns expressed by the Affordable Housing Advisory Committee with the compliance of micro units to the existing land use incentive grant policy. Barring any questions on that, the other committee meeting we have on May 16th is the Equity and Engagement Committee. And so first item on that agenda is going to be an update from Brenda Mills on reparations. Reparations has their next meeting on May 15th. So Brenda will walk through the discussion that is held on May 15th. She'll additionally provide some updates on where we are in the selection process for the firm that will be conducting the audit. And just want to give give you all an update that yesterday we had a really productive pre-submittal meeting with interested firms. I believe there were 7 firms represented and 9 total individuals who participated on that call. And we are accepting proposals through June 8th of 2023. And hopefully later this summer, we'll be selecting the firm to conduct that joint city-county audit. Next on the agenda for May 16th is an update from Dowah Hitch on our National Community Survey. The survey is conducted every 3 years, so Dowah is just going to provide a general overview of the standardized questions on that survey, and then is also going to be seeking feedback on some of the open-ended questions that are part of that survey process. Dowah is also going to provide an update on the Neighborhood Matching Grant Program. We are actually accepting applications currently from March 27th through May 27th. We'll be accepting applications. And so Dowah is going to give an update on some of our existing awards and some overview of upcoming changes to the Neighborhood Matching Grant process. And finally, on the agenda for May 16th, Frank McGowan is going to provide an update along with representatives from Miller 3 on our disparity study, just giving a status update on where we are and then providing an overview of what can be expected at the October 24th meeting, where Miller 3 will be presenting the study results and then recommending any necessary policy and operational changes. So that concludes the EEC overview. Councilmember Turner?
Yeah, I actually just wanted to make a comment about HCD, waiting for you to finish. I wanted to make sure to point out to council that, again, just a reminder that HCD and AHAC are kind of the pilot for this work plan idea under boards and commissions restructuring. And so this is a moment in time to reflect and say, you know, it's actually going really well. So we have been able to go directly to AHAC with specific requests, and they have been so great and diligent in exploring the ideas and coming right back with feedback, and in this case, a recommendation. So just to, you know, when we get to this boards and commissions review at some point later in the year or next year, whenever that happens, I just want to make sure that we have plenty of opportunities along the way to reflect on how it's working. And in this case, I'd say it's working really well.
Thank you, Sage.
Okay, if that concludes our review of council committees, we can move to the 8-week agenda items. I have a couple I want to bring your attention to on that, and I won't spend a lot of time on these. The first and most important is the budget public hearing is scheduled for May 23rd. So we're about to talk about that, but that would be the next meeting. So that's just around the corner, so to speak. A couple other things I want to just share a little bit of information on is the South Slope Vision Plan. That's been out and being worked on for a long time now. Actually, we've had that at council a few, it may be months ago at this point, but some, you know, recently. Staff is out working with the community. We want to make sure we get that right before we bring it back to you. So we're not going to have the South Slope Vision Plan back until we know that we've kind of closed those loops that exist with the community. So I don't have a definitive timeline on that, but again, just want to reiterate that staff is actively working on trying to get that plan completed. Another thing to be aware of is the Pack Square Vision Plan. That's another planning process that's been underway for some time now, and around the Pack Square area and the block. As council's aware, we recently applied for funds from the Mellon Foundation to support that planning effort. I know that there's a draft of that plan that's under review right now at the staff level. So again, hoping to have that to council sometime in the next month or two. So that's just underway, and again, want to make sure that plan is accurate and reflects input and good practice before we bring it forward to council. And the last thing is a text amendment, and this went to Planning and Zoning Commission actually last night. There is a consideration of some changes to the requirements for our neighborhood meetings. The city for some time now has required developers to have neighborhood meetings before they begin their application process. So before things get to council for approval, there's a set of neighborhood meetings that typically occurs. That's never been codified very strongly or very directly. So one thing that the staff has done, and give a lot of credit to the Coalition of Asheville Neighborhoods for really leaning in and pushing on this, is we're trying to be more clear on the standards and the expectations for how a developer conducts a neighborhood meeting and how they share information and what the expectations are for that developer. So that's in terms of the how notice is provided, how meetings are conducted, and how information from those meetings are reported. So I think that'll be an improvement in terms of how council can receive information from neighbors. So those are the items that I wanted to highlight. I don't know if Deborah or Rachel, if there's any items that you'd like to highlight as well.
I would like to highlight one other one, which is the adoption of the budget, we hope, would be in June the 13th. And the public hearing, I think you talked about it, would be on May the 23rd.
Thank you, Deborah. So
Absolutely.
if there are no questions on the 8-week agenda, next item or next area of our agenda today is the other issues and updates. And we're going to start that off with Deborah Campbell and Taylor Floyd.
All righty. Thank you again, Ben. We normally, before we have the manager's budget presented, just wanted to remind you all of the scope of the budget, and mostly what Taylor and I are going to do today is focus on new items, new investments. And I want everyone to understand what we're about to present is not the entire budget in its entirety. It is just an opportunity again for us to relook at those new investments. It's also intended for us and for you all to have a kind of a no surprise look at the budget. We hope when it's presented on Tuesday, there won't be anything that you're surprised about that's included in the budget on Tuesday. Because again, Tuesday will be the formal presentation of the manager's budget. So Taylor, I'm going to ask you to bring up the slide, and we've got several slides, but we can step through them relatively quickly. And if you can go to the next slide.
I'm trying.
And it's like we lost Sandra. Okay, I think we're gonna start over.
Are you all able to see that, or is it just?
Nope,
it look like
it's
loading?
still loading. Looks like it's still loading, Taylor.
Yeah, if he wants to send it, I can share it.
Taylor, if you want to send it to me
Yeah,
or Katie, we can share.
I think that's the best thing to do. I apologize. While we are getting our technical things worked out, let's just skip this one and go to the retreat follow-up work session date. Rachel, you want to, if you're prepared.
Sure, absolutely. So based on the feedback we received at the April 25th council meeting, we are looking to schedule a dedicated work session to work through your strategic priority goals and make sure we've got those finalized so that staff can use that to inform our final organizational work plan, as well as the council committee work plans for the upcoming fiscal year. So what we heard on the 25th is we need around 3 hours, and just looking at calendars, our recommendation from staff is going to be having the work session immediately prior to either the June 13th or June 27th city council meeting. And so just wanted to poll you all briefly regarding what your preference is. I know Maggie sent me a message saying her preference was June 27th based on some committee meetings that are scheduled on June 13th. But just wanted to see if that 3 o'clock time period works for, or 2 o'clock time period works for council members on either June 13th or June 27th. Councilmember Roney.
I can do either of those, and I want to respect everyone's time, but I deeply encourage us to put the finishing touches on our retreat work before we vote on the budget. And so if the 13th is an option, I think we should do it.
Okay, looks like Katie might be, are there any?
So I'm sorry, Rachel, say the two dates again. It's the 13th or?
The 27th of June. So what I heard from Councilmember Roney, June 13th is the slated date for budget adoption. So does the 13th work for the majority of the rest of council to potentially have a 2 o'clock start time? I'm seeing some thumbs up. Okay, beautiful.
I mean, we're voting on.
Again, please.
You're
That date
supposed
again.
to, 13th of 27th. of
We're
June.
voting on the final budget on June 13th.
Correct.
That's what's scheduled now.
Yeah, well, okay, so if something different comes out of the work session, that seems pretty difficult to incorporate into a budget we're voting on like 2 seconds later, but. So
I'm
I
not
assume-
suggesting we would make
and-
major
and
changes
budget
before we can
documents.
finish our work.
Ju- Okay, and the 23rd was too early, May 23rd was too early, I assume.
We just think it'll be challenging to get materials prepared and be able to have the facilitated session on that date. But we can certainly work towards that if that's the desire of council.
No, I don't want to, yeah, you guys got a lot on your plate. So would the idea be with the work session, what I understand, it'd be an in-person work session ahead of the council meeting. And would we'd be in the chamber, the council chamber? Is that the idea? That's fine. I don't.
From an AV perspective, that would be preferable. We could do it on the first floor, but then we'd have to move to the second floor for the council meeting. So the intent would be just kind of picking up where we left off at your March retreat, going through the 70 draft strategic priority goals that you came up with, getting feedback on what's missing, and hopefully getting to a place where we can get some agreement from council on what those consolidated goals should be to then inform the remainder of our strategic planning elements.
Perfect. Sounds great. Thanks.
So just to confirm, I'm hearing June 13th works for the majority, and we're going to go with 2 o'clock on June 13th. Okay, thank you.
All right, so I think that we have addressed the technology glitch that we had. So Katie, if you want to pull it up, see if you can pull up the budget presentation, appreciate it. Okay, you can go to the next slide. All right, thank you. Okay, as I said earlier, these are kind of the highlights of the proposed budget. And again, we are trying to ensure that there's no surprise on May 9th when the manager presents her budget, I present. So while revenue growth continues, especially sales tax, we identified needs in departmental budget requests exceed available funding capacity. What that means, consistently every year, we always don't have enough to address all of the needs. I don't know what municipality does. But this year, it's a little bit different in terms of how we are trying to get to a balanced budget. And we're gonna have to use fairly good amount of fund balance, which is not traditionally what we have done in the past. We have used maybe $1 million, $2 million, so forth, but we're using a fairly significant amount this year. When we were thinking about things that, if we're going to use fund balance, then what are the things in terms of the budget requests that were made from departments should we be using fund balance on and trying to minimize those kind of ongoing expenses? And so Taylor will be providing you with kind of those one-time things, and as well as all of what we are trying to use fund balance for in terms of balancing this budget this year. But we did look at and rethought about a one-time investment, which would be the Urban Forest Master Plan, and including that in our recommended budget. And I hope that you all will sense that the investments that we are recommending respond to increased operating costs, the essential infrastructure that is needed for us to deliver city services, staff retention, and recruitment, and community safety needs. Kim.
In our Urban Forestry Commission meeting this week, there was an update to the recommendation from their February recommendation, which included a letter from the group asking for us to apply for the IRA funds, specifically around not just the Urban Forestry Master Plan, but also implementation. So will we speak into that opportunity that it wouldn't just be the city funding?
We absolutely, if there is, and I'm glad you said that because it was part of my notes and I overlooked it. We plan to apply for that grant, and if we do not need the money, we can not take it out of the fund balance, our general fund at that point. So yes, we will be pursuing every opportunity, but if not, and if we're not successful with the grant, we will still have the funding available, but we would not start the plan because the urban forester just got on board and needs to get his sea legs, would not be started until the fourth quarter
So
to actually start planning process.
Okay, so if we're looking at it for this budget cycle, but later on in our budget cycle.
Start it, to start the initiative. Yes, ma'am.
So would, are we just looking at IRA fund grant application for just the plan, or is it possible to also include implementation as well if we have an opportunity to partner?
Sure. I don't know if I can respond to that right now as part of the budget process, and possibly that's separate from, you know, the grant application process. This is, we will have funding to at least develop the plan. If there are other opportunities to receive funding, we're certainly making ourselves available to
Okay.
apply
I just
for
want to make
those
sure we
grants.
didn't, I appreciate that. I just want to make sure we weren't missing an opportunity to go ahead and ask for what we need.
Sure.
Hey, Maggie, I know you've got a question. Deborah, I'm just wondering if you should do this presentation and then we do all the questions. Is that okay?
That's fine with me. Mayor. Yeah, because we are running a little late and we've got maybe 2 more items. All right, Taylor, you want to take over?
Sure, thank you. Yeah, and I will try to run through this quickly, but if you all have questions, please let me know. So I wanted to start off talking about how we're going to fund these investments, the revenue side of the equation. You can go to the next slide. High-level overview of the general fund. We have total growth of $5.4 million. That's a little bit higher than the last estimate that we gave you all, primarily related to some updated estimates on sales tax. We continue to see strong growth there. It also includes kind of our normal property tax growth and additional revenue from council approved fee increases, which for the general fund is primarily sanitation. On the expense side, we have a pretty significant increase of $13.3 million. That is mostly related to growth in personnel costs, especially the adjustments that we've talked to you all about previously around compensation and benefits for employees, but also includes some inflation and price volatility on the operating side and the additional investments that we're going to run through here in a moment. Next slide. So you all had asked us to follow up with some information about fund balance in the last work session. As a reminder, we showed this slide last time. Essentially, our current estimates are that we will end this fiscal year with revenues exceeding expenses by $1.7 million. So what that means for fund balance is we would add that to our fund balance total. The beginning of this fiscal year, based on our audit, we had $34.6 million in fund balance. So we add that 1.7 and get to 36.3. And next slide, we got more math that I'll try to walk you through quickly. So again, starting off with that 36.3 million, our proposed budget, the manager's recommended budget for FY24 for next fiscal year totals 172.4 million. So that gets us to a rough estimate of fund balance percentage at 21%, which, as you all know, is above our 15% policy. And that means, and again, I do want to make sure I emphasize that all of these numbers are estimates, but that would mean that we would have somewhere around $10.4 million estimated over our policy. So in the budget, we have $3.7 million of one-time items, which are things that we would typically align fund balance appropriations with, since it is a one-time revenue source. But we also have an additional $4.2 million of needs just to balance to get to that $172.4 million number. So if you add those two together, that brings us pretty close to our 15% policy at somewhere around 16%. And again, I want to emphasize that these are estimates. We won't know the actual figure until the audit is complete in the fall. Again, we do prefer to align one-time revenues with one-time expenditures. So this does introduce a level of risk, especially if economic conditions change. But of course, we will monitor and make adjustments as necessary. If there aren't any questions, I will move on from that. All right, next slide. So just a quick kind of summary at the fund level. Again, you can see that $13.3 million increase in the general fund. All of our other operating, our enterprise funds, have increases as well. For water and stormwater, that's primarily related to fee increases and investments in those services. And then we see other increases with some items, again, that we'll talk about through the rest of the presentation. Next slide. So shifting to the expense side of the equation, I just wanted to hit briefly on our investment in employees. You can go to the next slide. We're recommending a variety of compensation and benefit adjustments that we hope will help us to recruit and retain employees, especially in APD and other places where we are finding it challenging to fill positions. And our recommendations do meet the Just Economics Pledge living wage rate. Next slide. I won't go over all of these in detail because, again, you all have seen this list before. I will mention, the largest piece being the salary increase, across the board increase of 5% or 6% for sworn APD positions. And then again, a variety of other items that we think will help us with recruiting and retaining employees and make sure that we're, giving people opportunities to make money when we're asking them to do extra work, like coming in for on-call, working on night shift, incentivizing people to get certificates and things of that nature. Next slide. So shifting over to new investments, again, as the city manager mentioned, this list is not comprehensive. It's not everything we're doing and every service we provide. We're really focused on kind of adds to the budget for FY24. And I will also note that those compensation changes that I just talked about, we believe will positively impact all of the services that we provide, although we did not list that one on every single slide. Next slide. So starting with community safety and emergency response, we have a few one-time items here, including upgrading APD vehicle cameras, upgrading APD uniforms for durability and comfort, and then also providing some additional funding to replace furniture at fire stations. Next slide. For community engagement and public information, we have a existing time-limited position that we're upgrading to a full-time constituent services position that will help increase our capacity to respond to inquiries and provide information to the public. We also are making an investment in some software that will help us better manage the board and commission appointment process and membership, and also give us some more information that we can use to report on that to you all and to the community. Next slide. In trash and recycling collection, we have a solid waste master plan that will help us develop our long-term plan for this service, adding some collection staff that will support an additional route that we need just based on residential growth, and that's offset by revenue from the fee increase that you all approved. And then in sustainability, we have the single-use plastics initiative. Next slide. For entertainment programming, we have a few items at a few different facilities. One is an animal care position at the Nature Center to support the new exhibit that I believe is under development right now. That's partially offset by some additional revenue that they expect to receive. An events manager to help oversee and support events at the Civic Center. That's in the Harris Cherokee Center Asheville Fund. As you all saw earlier today, Chris Corral is a little busier than he used to be with things outside of the Civic Center, so we need kind of backfill some support at the management level there. And then, as you all are aware, we have a substantial investment in McCormick Field to renovate and upgrade that facility and keep the tourists and add some additional programming opportunities there. And that is in our capital fund. Next slide. So administration and financial management, a few items here as well. We have an additional position in the finance department that's specifically related to purchasing support for the water maintenance warehouse. So that's kind of the items that they use to maintain the distribution system. That is partially funded by the water fund. Some administrative support for the city attorney's office, and also some fleet management software that will help us do a better job of collecting information about maintenance, vehicle replacement, and fuel usage. That's also, of course, going to help us with some of our sustainability goals as they relate to carbon reduction in our fleet. Next slide. So for parks and facilities maintenance, we have a janitorial position to support a new building. That new building is the Broadway Public Safety Center, and improve service at some of our other facilities. Access to our work order asset management system that will help, again, provide some better tracking and reporting for parks maintenance. Some additional staffing funded through the Civic Center Fund to help with both event production and facility maintenance there. And then some additional funding for planned repairs at the municipal building in our capital program. Next slide. And sidewalks and roadways, similar to the parks item on the previous slide, we have our work order asset management system that will help transportation track and manage some of their assets that include traffic signals, traffic signs, and pavement markings. And then you all approved the I-26 Aesthetics Committee recommendations earlier in this calendar year. That's included in our 5-year CIP. Next slide. Code enforcement and urban planning. We have a one-time design review guidelines that will help support the development of some new streetscape plans, I think specifically related to downtown and some other areas. We are also working to replace our land development software. So that's our permitting software that folks down in DSD use. That's a significant investment, but is going to be funded through the permit technology fee that's applied to permits that are issued down in DSD. And then, as the city manager mentioned, the one item that we have not discussed as a recommendation prior is the urban forestry master plan. Next slide. On the water side, again, you all have seen this list previously. We have an approved fee increase that will cover a variety of investments in our water distribution and production system, some accrue to help with maintenance on the distribution system, additional staffing for the water treatment plants, communications, customer service that will help as we transition to our new meters as those are replaced, and then continuing to recover the lost revenue from the capital fee that we no longer have. And we did want to make mention, as you all directed, that we will be looking to make adjustments to the rates and rate structure once we have the results of our consultant study. Next slide. In our stormwater fund, we have approved fee increases that will help to fund some additional position to improve inspections for privately constructed stormwater devices, system mapping, which will really help to guide our capital investments in the future in the stormwater system, and some capital vehicle and equipment purchases for the stormwater fund. Next slide. In parking, I will note that the parking revenues for the current year seem to have recovered to pre-pandemic levels, which is a really great sign. So we've budgeted to reflect that for the next fiscal year. We are looking to do an operational study that will help us assess the organizational structure in the parking fund, their service levels and what our priorities are, and also how our parking assets, which are mostly the parking garages, are performing financially. We have a garage assessment that is currently underway, a capital assessment. We'll also have some capital funds available to respond to some immediate needs that have already been identified as part of that work. Next slide. In transit, while we do not have any planned service enhancements to transit service, we are seeing a really significant increase in the cost to just maintain our existing service, primarily due to 3 items: our contractual increase from the management company, increased costs for our paratransit service, and some really substantially increased fuel cost, probably in part due to some of the service reductions that we had to make in the prior fiscal year. We do have the City County Master Plan funded, and some additional one-time support for grants management and the procurement process for the new management company. That RFP will have to go out, and a new process to select a vendor for that in the next fiscal year. We did also include an additional bus purchase to try to make sure we're maintaining our existing fleet of buses in our capital program. And finally, we did want to make mention that the transit fund is balanced utilizing approximately $2 million in ARPA funding. That's the $2 million that we allocated in the current year budget to the general fund that we don't think we're going to need, because again, our revenues will come in, but we expect our revenues to come in over expenses. So we're planning to utilize that to help fund some of these additional items and just the rising cost of service in the transit fund. Next slide. And finally, we have a few other things. One is really hits on a variety or a few of our services, including real estate management, affordable housing, and urban planning. We're actually redeploying an existing position to be a redevelopment manager with an initial focus on redeveloping city-owned properties. And again, that's that affordable housing connection. And then we did also want to make sure that we mentioned the increase in reparations funding and our plan to kind of continue that increase over time. Next slide. So to kind of wrap all of that up, which I know I went through very quickly, again, those compensation and benefit changes will positively impact all city services. We have a total of 20 new positions that we're recommending. Most of those are either related to enterprise funds or our new fee increases like the Nature Center and sanitation staffing. We think that these additions really do focus on our basic city services, especially community safety and infrastructure, and of course align with the priorities that you all have laid out at your retreat, which again I won't go through in detail because you all are well aware of those, but have them listed there. Next slide. So to wrap up, our next steps are the formal presentation of the manager's proposed budget to you all at your council meeting on Tuesday, May 9th. Then we will have the statutorily required budget public hearing on May 23rd at that council meeting, and are targeting adoption of the budget at the June 13th council meeting. That is the last slide, so happy to answer any questions you all have.
And thank you, Taylor. And before we take questions, I just wanted to make sure that you all understand again why we were making this presentation to you today. Again, it's no surprise budget. We have had work sessions. We have had a number of conversations with you. We are looking at this as kind of a culmination of all those discussions that we've had with you. And at one time, you can see the budget, particularly in terms of the new investments, but also to see that we are utilizing this budget to a large extent, a greater extent, to help us build the fundamental infrastructure that's needed for us to clearly deliver more effectively city services. So all of those tools that we need, information, our ability to respond to information that is requested of us. We just haven't had that infrastructure in the past, and well, I shouldn't say we haven't had it. We need to enhance it. And so that's what this budget is, kind of a brass tacks. It's a baseline budget for us. So I will stop there and take questions. Maggie?
And I know we'll talk about all this on Tuesday, but I am excited. I feel like I can see how much listening has been happening through this iterative process. I know that I think the language y'all used was unconventional use of fund balance. I hear how cautious you all are, and that is so important. And I'm excited, given how much need we have, that we're taking some of those really calculated steps forward to do the planning, particularly with the urban forest master plan. I wasn't, when we had inquired about that earlier, what I hear is y'all need to get some work done first. And I'm excited that if we just encumber the money into this year, whether it's Q3 or Q4, we don't have to wait all over again, and we can keep that commitment that the community has been asking for. I thought that's just like wise and thoughtful, so long as we all have grace in letting you get what you need done before we start that plan. So I'm excited about that. And I just appreciate still being really above our policy on the fund balance, right? 16% is still above our policy. So we're still being really financially responsible, but balancing that with getting this stuff moving forward. So I'm excited.
Thank you, Meg. Tim?
Yeah, in addition to urban forestry and appreciation of considering it for this budget cycle and the partnership, because I think that we can make these dollars go farther. I have two other ones. One is, what is the depth of the fuel cost that's having impact on our transit budget? Because this item has veered in and out of the lane of conversation. And it's just an annual reminder for me of the importance to prioritize at minimum hybrid bus purchases, not just for our carbon footprint, but also for long-term cost savings. So when gas prices go up, it doesn't disrupt our transit budget so much, but it would help me to understand long-term what our picture is if I knew what percentage of that was driving the concern around the transit budget.
We can provide that follow-up.
Thank you. And then the third thing is, I've been having some conversations with some county commissioners about the difficulty and the strategies around recruiting and retaining staff, because that's how we provide quality, equitable service outcomes for the long haul. And I wonder, I'm hearing that the county's looking at going fully with the 2010 living wage compliance instead of the pledged 18%, which is not living wage based on housing. And I know we don't have time at this point in the budget cycle to look at that. I'm just wondering, are we having that conversation with the county? Because are we getting ready to lose our good people to a similar employer across the street?
So I meet with the town managers throughout Buncombe County, and we had that discussion. And I don't think that would be it. Well, I don't want to speak for any of the other managers in terms of their recommended budgets. I'll stop there. But yes, we have definitely had those conversations amongst ourselves.
As we look at the cost of housing, I know the living wage calculator includes 2 counties beyond Buncombe County. So I know that folks are driving a long way to get to work, and that's just one of the many ways. If we impact wages, then it can have a ripple effect on cost of housing, cost of groceries, transportation, and childcare. It's such a big swash that I don't know if we can ignore it for very long.
Sure. And one of the things, Ms. Ronnie, that has happened is we have had significant increases in city employee pay. Thankfully, you all have provided that support for us. We just finished a compression study. Making that adjustment would have significant impact on a bridge we just crossed. And so it's not that we are resistant, it is the ability to manage that process in a fair way. When we make those adjustments, it just bumps up. It just has such a huge ripple effect and impact. But I think that we are, again, making headway in terms of salary and our competitiveness with other municipalities and with the private sector. But also, one of the big things with local government, and I know that we have a disagreement sometime on this issue, is our benefits that we provide. So it's, our total package of wages plus benefits, I think makes us competitive. And Mayor.
So when you talk about impact, do you mean fiscal impact when you were talking about the compression?
Yes, fiscal.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I'm just kind of reacting to Councilwoman Roney's comment about ignoring it. I think we've been doing everything not to ignore this issue and been very aggressive with pay raises last year and this year. The will is there. I think the will is there. I just looked at a fund balance scenario where we're using 4.2 or whatever the number was to balance this year's budget. That is not a scenario where it looks to me like we can afford to do more with what we've got unless we made cuts to staffing. We reduced the number of staff to pay folks more. And I know we've had this discussion many times about the impacts of overtime and whether or not to reallocate staff time, so we're reducing those impacts. So I don't want to rob this council of the recognition that I think they've worked really hard to try to make sure we're doing as much as we possibly can for the hardworking folks of the city. If the funds were there, I would of course, and I think everybody here would, support doing more than we're already doing in this.
To follow up, I certainly don't think we're ignoring living wages in general, because we've been having those conversations in every budget work session, and I appreciate that. The new information to me was that we were talking about going to 18 as the pledge rate because the county was also. And if new information comes forward that the county is going for the 2010 base rate, then we shouldn't ignore that part of the conversation because it could have an impact on our organization.
But I just want to clarify that we weren't going to that 1810. I think we're above that. And we are above what the pledged living wage is. It wasn't just because the county was doing something. It was because we looked at our organization where we are from a salary perspective, and this was our best recommendation for the 5% increase that would get us to over the just economics pledged living wage.
Yeah, I mean, I'm open. Do you have suggestions of where you'd cut in the budget to get to this? Because I share a lot of the sentiment of wanting to be fair and just, and I appreciate how thoughtful and how much hard work staff has put into balancing things. Like, you know, a lot of I think there's been a lot of good work put into what we need and want with what we can afford. So I'm totally open to hear if you have any proposals of where you've cut the budget to move in this direction.
To be honest, I don't have specific proposals because we have been going through this entire budget process together. And those kinds of proposals would need to come from staff, but I would expect that we wouldn't be able to do the kind of quality of life investments that we're working on for our staff and the work environment as well, if we were to get to the 2010. However, if we don't have this part of the conversation in our budget conversations, it should be no surprise that if the county goes to 2010, it will have an impact.
Well, Deborah and I have a meeting with Avril later today on something else, so we can check in with her and make sure we're not out of whack here.
And if I could briefly interject, Councilmember Roney, I can answer your question about the fuel since I'm in my office and looking at my computer right now, which is not typically the case, but it is over $200,000 increase, which is roughly 17% of the total increase in the transit fund.
So 17% increase in the transit fund at $200,000 for just this past year, or our projection for next year?
From what we have budgeted this year to what we are projecting and have budgeted for next year.
Thank you for that. I appreciate it.
If there are no further questions, that's all we have on the budget. And we're about 2 minutes over, so I'm going to do a time check to see how we're doing. I think we can get through the next items in about 5 minutes. If you could give us 5 minutes.
Yeah, Antoinette had to drop off, but I just wanted to.
Okay, thank you.
And I can talk fast. Hello, everybody. I'm Sarah Gross, the Deputy Clerk, and I'm here with you all today to give a brief update on formalizing the process for advisory boards to report and connect with the council committees throughout the remaining of this year. This is building off the momentum of the Equity and Engagement Council Committee, which has already heard reports from the African American Heritage Commission, Human Relations Committee, and the Neighborhood Advisory Committee. So linked in your agenda as well as shown here, thank you, Katie, is kind of what we thought where advisory boards could report to. So thinking about the time frame, there's no major rush. I will be reaching out to the advisory board chairs to find a time that is convenient to them, maybe looking at major milestones that they have ahead to strategize when it'd be a good time to come in front of council committee, but also working with the city manager's office about the council committee agenda. So again, no rush. Looking throughout the remaining of the year, you may be seeing some updates from advisory boards. So this is more or less a short-term kind of level setting initiative to provide all boards or all advisory boards the opportunity to connect with council. Thinking about the long-term or ongoing programming, similar to the affordable housing and HCD pilot that Councilwoman Turner referenced, we'll be waiting for the council committee work planning process to look for alignment, but also waiting for the realignment working group's recommendations. So more to come on the long-term programming. This is more or less some updates that we'll see throughout the remaining year. If there's no major concerns from council, the clerk's office will begin coordinating and scheduling with the board chairs. So you can look forward to seeing some updates on your council committee agendas. Any questions or concerns?
Thanks for the update, Sarah.
Thanks, all.
All right, Dan, downtown.
I've got the last item. I'm going to move through this pretty quickly and hopefully not keep you any longer than we need to. So the Downtown Safety Initiative, the 60-day initiative launched on Monday of this week. as council knows and the community does. It's a multi-departmental effort that provides a continuous focus on safety and cleanliness in our central business district. We've identified Dana Frankel from the planning department. She is our project manager of this for the 60-day initiative, and she'll be supported by a team of staff from Asheville Police Department, Asheville Fire Department's Community Responder Pilot Program. We've got operational departments that are a part of this, including Public Works, Parks and Recreation, and Transportation. And then we have support departments that are also participating in this, including the Office of Data and Performance, our CAPE team, and the City Manager's Office. And so the focus of the initiative includes a number of things, and I just want to cover a couple real quickly. One is increased law enforcement presence in the downtown area by APD. I do want to note that the Buncombe County Sheriff's Office, they had a 4-week program where they were deploying deputies to the downtown area in the weekend. That 4-week program that they provided ends this weekend, so this is the last weekend of that. And I do want to thank the sheriff for his participation and commitment to that. In addition to the increased law enforcement presence, we also have enhanced security in our parks from our park warden. We're going to have an additional public safety presence in general from our community responder teams that are out and about. I hope everybody's seen this already, but there's increased cleanliness activities in the downtown area. So you probably see a lot of city crews in the CBD these past 2 days. And of course, a focus on code compliance with things like graffiti, code issues such as that. We're also working through the 60-day initiative to focus on strengthening our relationships with our local private and nonprofit organizations. We want to do things like schedule community cleanups. We want to have public safety walks and assessments and do those things in coordination with our community partners. The initiative is off, I believe, to a great start. I mean, this is the day 4. So we're just getting started, but in addition to what I've kind of worked through today, previously, we've had city staff that conducted a lighting review last night. So there was a team of city staff and APD out last night walking the central business district to identify either lights that need to be replaced or repaired, or maybe areas that we need to add lights. Additionally, yesterday we had, and this is in addition to the crews that are out, we had 25 city employees that volunteered for a cleanup in downtown in partnership with Greenworks. That was on again yesterday, and I think there are more of those kind of volunteer-based cleanups I think there are actually 5 more of those planned over the course of this 60-day initiative. And then finally, we've already gotten interest from the business community. We're working to schedule 3 public safety walks. So those will occur in different areas of downtown, and that'll include city staff, business owners. Hopefully that'll include some city council members as well. We would invite you to be a part of those public safety walks. And then really during the course of the entire initiative in its entirety, we do want to continue to provide regular updates to council and the community as well. We'll have a project page. It exists, but it's going to get more robust as we are able to collect information. But our project page, we're going to update that at a minimum bi-weekly, and what we want to make sure we include is any data that we're tracking that may impact the initiative. That'll be posted bi-weekly. That's service-related data. We want to provide information on how community members can get involved. We want to have a resource where community members and council and everybody can see what are planned activities that are occurring. So Councilwoman Turner, I'll just stop there for a second and make your question or comment. Yes.
Okay, you can go ahead.
Go ahead. You're on.
Okay. Sorry. I was just thinking, I don't want to interrupt you. If you have more to say, I can hold my questions to the end.
No, I just got 2 closing thoughts.
Go ahead.
I'll go ahead and do that. I'm done almost basically. So yeah, that's really the update. And I just want to, the city manager's office, we want to thank staff for a great kickoff to this initiative so far. We hope these collective efforts that we're working on will continue to be successful over the next 56 days of the initiative. Again, we're really early in this, but we really appreciate the work that's been done so far. And then finally, just want to reassure council and the community that the efforts that are occurring in downtown in no way suggest that we aren't focused on public safety across the entire community. So that remains important to the city. And that concludes my update.
Thank you, Ben. Great update. And I want to echo appreciations for both staff and community members and everybody, APD, Sheriff Department, that have been teaming up to work on this issue. And it is nice to be able to open my inbox and hear some appreciations for it from the businesses and residents that are feeling safer already. So I wanted to extend some appreciations for that. I have a couple of questions. Are we going to hear from the Sheriff's Department on anything they may have ascertained, or perhaps Public Safety Committee will? Sorry for the background noise. And I'm wondering if there's any discussion around the potential of continuing it any longer. And then also a follow-up question. I've been hearing from some, well, in particular, nonprofit in the community that had an idea around how they may be able to help with some needs in downtown. I wasn't sure where to direct that. It sounded like maybe to Dana Frankel as project manager now. Okay, great. And then last thing is we may want to consider some kind of public information post at Cape Outreach or something. I have a little bit of a concern. There's been this Craven Street cleanup, and there's momentum around actual residents getting together to go clean it up. I'm not sure that that's a safe thing. We may want to evaluate if we want to notify residents of a proper procedure. Like, do we really want them out there cleaning it up? And if not, we may need to recommend that they don't. So yeah, a couple questions, and I'm not sure what to do with that last piece.
I would suggest the Craven Street, we definitely coordinate with NCDOT since it is their property. From the photographs that I've seen, I would wholeheartedly suggest that we not have volunteers doing it unless it was a supervised volunteer cleanup with professional biohazard type of resources.
Yes.
Out there to manage that process.
Agree. And I know NCDOT has been in contact already. So this process has started and services have been going, but I saw what amounted to be hundreds of people on social media talking about getting together to go clean it up. And I thought maybe we want to have more of an official recommendation to the public about that.
Absolutely. Ben, we have the actual days that they're going.
Correct. The DOT has scheduled the cleanup for May 10th through 12th. It's significant enough that they're actually scheduling 3 days for that one cleanup. We continue, as we always have, to send outreach to that location. We have to make sure there's not individuals there or campers or anything like that. That's ongoing. So yes, that is scheduled. Definitely not the type of cleanup that residents should really do on their own. And again, I would encourage anybody, when there is cleanliness concerns, please use our Asheville app. That's a great way to get that information to us. And if the concern is on DOT property, we immediately notify NCDOT of that issue.
And you can call Stephanie.
And you can call Stephanie Gillum. Yep. When we talked about constituent services earlier in Taylor's presentation, that's who that person is. So,
Maggie, I know you've got a question. I just wanted to jump in on. I think this is a really difficult situation because it kind of highlights the public's frustration. They don't know who's responsible for cleanup. I think the reporting on it's been really confusing. I think, and we're trying to be good partners with the NCDOT and not step on each other's toes and not step on each other's toes in terms of communication. But I think from the public standpoint, it doesn't seem clear whose responsibility it is, and it's taking too long. So if there's a way for us to get a little more streamlined and clearer in communications around these types of situations, I think that would be really helpful. And because when we tell people to contact the city and use the Asheville app, that implies we're doing it. But in reality, what we do is we communicate with the NCDOT immediately following those communications. So maybe we need to make that clearer to folks, so when they interface with us, they understand the process that's going on. And it probably is the most efficient way to do it, but I'm sympathetic to the frustration and the people saying they want to just go take care of it themselves.
Sure, and it's kind of the same process that we would use if it were privately owned. This is publicly owned. It's just owned by the state. They would call us, we would go out, we would do this, we would make all of those coordinations.
Yep.
But ultimately, the property owner is responsible for the cleanup. Maggie?
I wanted to jump back to some of the downtown stuff, although that was really helpful and informative to listen to. So thank you about Craven Street. And similar in kind of communication, just I've been talking to some downtown businesses and they asked me a question I didn't know the answer to. So as we're looking to add depth to the site, this might be something already on the radar. But they were asking, they'd said that some of the firefighters had knocked on their door and kind of went up and down canvassing, introducing themselves, and they were really grateful for that. And then they asked like, what's their number? Who do we call when we want them instead of the police? And I was like, I'm not sure about that. So just kind of the folks that want to be engaging with the benefit of kind of the proactive support we're putting on the street, how do they reach out to them? They mentioned, and I know that there's a lot of good community engagement. So that was just something I didn't know the answer to that I'm sure other folks are going to wonder over time. So as that becomes clear, putting that on the site would be helpful.
Absolutely. We'll do that. Thank you. Any other questions, comments?
Well, I know you already kind of brought this up a little bit, but I share curiosity around if we have a scheduled report request on services met in partnership with the sheriff's office. I was thinking about like hours involved generally, or the kinds of calls and responses for services that were met. Were there any gaps identified? If we're looking for council support to have some sort of update from the sheriff's office, I would definitely support that.
I would just echo all the appreciation that's been put forward. I'm downtown right now. I come downtown most days and I've noticed a difference. People are making comments to me about noticing a difference. So I think that's fantastic. How to keep it up is going to be the challenge, obviously. My understanding is the sheriff's initiative was just to be 30 days initially, and he expressed to me that during that time they would be talking to folks and sort of assessing the needs. And so, I have reached out to him and thanked him and encouraged him to keep going. We're doing a 60-day initiative around policing. Our firefighter initiative is a pilot. It will be ongoing. But our staffing needs are getting better. I'm hearing some good news around that, but I don't think it'll be resolved after 30 days or 60 days. So I'm hopeful that the sheriff finds a way to continue the partnership with us, but I know they're kind of gathering information as they do this and sort of figuring out what fits best. Right now they're doing 9 p.m. to 1 a.m. Fridays and Saturdays only. So, whether that needs to be expanded or that's enough, those are the kinds of things they're trying to suss out. So, just that's what I know about it. So, and if you ever have any questions or encouragement for the sheriff, you can always reach out to him directly. He's very responsive as well.
I'll echo that. I've reached out to him this week and had a great conversation, and it's been a wonderful partnership. Really, kudos to the chief as well for taking this on.
Thank you. Anything else? Otherwise, ma'am, I think we have concluded our agenda unless there anything else you want to attend to.
No, thank you.
All right. See you all on Tuesday.
Thanks, everyone.
All right.
Bye-bye.